What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to be balancing our macros and finding out exactly how many calories we each individually should actually be eating, depending on our health and fitness goals. So let's get into it because there is a lot to unpack. So first of all, macros, we're looking at macronutrients. Our nutrition information guides show us them. So underneath our energy, which is usually in kilojoules, although if you're lucky enough to have something like Lipton iced tea on its thing, you can kind of tell there's a bit of a gap between this top line and the second one down. That's because it gives us the kilojoules in its top line, and its second line actually gives us in calories, before then going into the protein, the fats, and the carbs. Now, protein doesn't have a little sort of hyphenated indentation list thing going on, because protein's protein. Fats do, because you have good fats and bad fats. So for instance, a good fat might be omega-3 fatty acids, and a bad fat might just be a little too much olive oil in the pan, or an excess of butter, etc. So your saturated fats really is just supposed to be read as, these are the fats that are not necessarily good for, or like essential to your body. They're not going to be broken down naturally by your body. Whereas the total amount will give you a completely different number. I know the example he has all zeros, but the sort of instance, this doesn't help, there's no fattiness anyway. Your total fats will be a higher number than your saturated fats, and really it's just a game of take the total minus the saturated, and that's your unsaturated fats, and that's the, you know, good fats within that item. And then your carbs has the same thing for sugars, because sugars are not necessarily good. Other carbs are things like your starches, that sort of thing. So pasta, potatoes, a whole bunch of that sort of stuff has carbs, or is sort of considered as sort of a high carb food. Now obviously most things will have a bit of a mix here. It might sound weird, but I'm pretty sure if we're looking at like oils instead of, you know, like fat, then, you know, even vegetables will have some level of everything. I'll get that out the way at your face. So yeah, so for instance, like you might take, for instance, a steak and just be like, you know, I can see the fat there, but I can take that off, it's fine. And then it's just a protein, but it's also got glucose in it, which is a sugar. Milk, you might decide to, you know, drink light milk or skim milk to get rid of the fat out of that. It's still got lactose, which is a sugar. So yeah, lactose intolerant people are intolerant to the specific sugar within dairy products. Fructose is sort of the one found in fruits predominantly. Sucrose is like simple sugar, like that's cane sugar. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, but those are sort of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So yeah, cool. So that's that, and then obviously the last thing that's normally on there is sodium, because sodium is important to know how much sodium you're putting into your body, because salt can affect your blood pressure and cardiovascular illnesses. It can make or break a good day with a trip to the hospital or not. If your sodium level's too high, obviously you're gone. If it's too low, you're gone as well. We really are delicate little flowers, biologically speaking. So the article I've got here that I will link below, along with a bunch of weird looking maths equations that will be explained in this video. The article that will be linked there is for an if it fits your macros diet. Now, I do want to say before we get into it, this isn't a diet that's saying you can have this and you can't have that. This is a diet in the sense of what you eat in a day is your diet. If you're generally eating similar things at breakfast, similar things at lunch, similar things at dinner, then you have a daily diet. And we can, you can work with that. I don't know if anyone except for me has seen these ads and stuff on Facebook, but like the guys who are just absolutely shredded and they're trying to ask you, would you like to look like I do and still be able to eat this massive slice of pizza for dinner? They're working off a macro diet, is what they're working off. It's not going to tell you you can't have certain foods or you have to have more of a certain food or anything like that. It's simply adhering to a surplus or a deficit as far as your calories are concerned for what ends up being your basal metabolic rate and your total daily energy expenditure, which are what the maths is for. So the calorie content of each macros is as follows. For proteins and for carbs, 1 gram is 4 calories, roughly, like in general. For fats, 1 gram is 9, so quite a lot more, which will make a little bit more sense when you hear what the percentages are, because if they were all, if it was 1 gram is 1 calorie sort of a thing, 1 for 1 trade-off, some of these percentages would make it seem like you're eating a whole heap of fat, and that's not the case. So let's have a look. Cool, so first things first, we need to set up our BMR, our basal metabolic rate. Now, if I can remember where I've put my other little phone, I actually have already sorted this out for myself. Are you even up here? I have no idea where it is. Okay, cool. I don't have numbers to show you then. Unless it's like way over the side here, trying to hide from me. And it's dead. Anyway, so that's super helpful. Okay, cool. So factors for your BMR are your sex or gender, whichever word you prefer to use there. Now, wanting to be aware of the trans community, but we are looking at unless you've already transitioned, we are looking at assigned gender, unfortunately, just because of hormones and that sort of thing, and how they would interact within your body. all that sort of stuff. So we are looking at assigned gender. But for men, we start with the number 66, then we take our weight in pounds, see the first little sum, and we times that by 6.23, so that sum in the description is the pounds to kilograms ratio, or it'll be the kilograms to, it'll either be kilograms to pounds or pounds to kilograms. Probably kilograms to pounds, because then you're going to end up with your pounds and you'll have a number that you can times by 6.23. Then we will take our height in inches, easy enough. Are you 6'1", 6'2", 5'11", 5'3", you could be a shorty, I'm not here to judge. Whatever it is, take that number, your first number, your feet, times that by 12, and then add your inches number. It's that easy. So for me, I'm 6'1", I would be 73 inches. So I would take 73 and I would times that by 12.7, which is a massive number. And then from this total number, so 66 plus whatever I've gotten for my weight in pounds times 6.23 plus whatever I've gotten for my height in inches times 12.7. From that total number, I'm then going to subtract my age in years times 6.8. And that should give me my BMR. Now, for men, ideally, we want that to be around 1600. Women, you have a completely different calculation to do, because your number starts off wildly different. Instead of being something around the 66 mark, you start at 655, but all of your numbers are smaller that you're timesing by. So it's still weight in pounds, so it's still using our little converter below, but times by 4.35 instead of 6.23. Then your height in inches times by 4.7, which is massively different to the 12.7 that males are timesing theirs by. And therein is probably the difference between that, the 655 and the 66. And then from that, you're going to subtract your age in years times 4.7 again. So you start at a much higher number, but all of yours sort of sit within those mid 4 points. Whereas men, their smallest number is 6.23, and it just goes up from there. And for you, it should end up being around about 1400, sort of your magic number. If it's a little bit higher than that, a little bit lower than that, that's fine. Cool. Now, obviously, if you've got a really good BMI, you should be able to calculate your BMR, which is a completely different thing. So if you're, for your height, and if for your height your BMI is sitting at around about that 21 mark, which I think is like the perfect zone people want, that health officials want you to be in, and like fitness experts have said is the best. Your BMR should be pretty close to spot on these goal numbers as well, because if you're at sort of the best weight for your height, your BMR should be pretty spot on as well. Cool. So from this, we are then going to calculate our total daily energy expenditure, because that BMR, that's your basal metabolic rate. So that number you've got in front of you is the amount of calories that you burn in a day if you spend the entire day lying in bed doing nothing. that is how much you are burning already. So we then need to calculate our daily energy expenditure, which is very easy. This one's not at all as difficult as that first bit. We've got all of the difficult parts out of the way. Basically, there are 5 levels of exercise that we can get at. So we've got sedentary, which is little to no exercise, lightly active, moderately active, very active, and extra active. So our lightly active is light exercise 1 to 3 days a week. Moderately active is moderate exercise 3 to 5 days a week. Very active is hard exercise 6 to 7 days a week. And then extra active is very hard exercise and physical job, or 2 or more training sessions a week. If you're doing 1 training session a week, and sort of lightly active at work or lightly active otherwise, but you have that 1 workout session as well, use that to bump yourself up into the moderately active, because you're still sitting on that 3 days a week, but your workout would be counting for a little bit more. So yeah, and so based on whatever level you're at, sedentary, you're going to take your BMR and you're going to times it by 1.2. For lightly active, you're going to take your BMR and times it by 1.375. Getting into the nitty gritty of decimal points here. For moderately active, you would think based on belief there that it's going to be 1.5, and you'd be right. But we've also got another 5 after that. It's 1.55. It doesn't go up evenly for whatever reason. Very active is 1.725, and like I said, a 1.2 or 1.25 to 1.375 to 1.5 to 1.725 should make that a 2, but it's 1.9. It's close enough to, but yeah, this is all going to be linked in that article anyway. They've got a little infographic that you can have a look at, which is why I haven't written all of these in the description, because they're on that site. So this will give you a full number, and that number, whatever it might be, I mean, if we take, I can't use that, it's not on. Let's open up a calculator on the tablet and do just, alright, so, being that I am male myself, we're gonna chuck that in there, and we're gonna times that by, let's say that this is for a tradie who does go to the gym a couple days a week, so we're going to times that by 1.9. So 1600 times 1.9 give you sort of a maximum there of 3040. Obviously, if yours ends up being higher for whatever reason, your number's going to be higher, but again, this is just for an example. And if it was a woman, and I mean, she could be a tradie too, why not? I would like to use other numbers there, but yeah, no, let's see what the upper limit for women is, going off their ideal. Okay, so theirs will be 2,660. So difference of 380, which realistically isn't that much when it comes down to it. It's not a whole heap. Cool. So once you know your TDEE, all you have to do is decide what fitness goal is, and you'll be able to figure out what your target calorie intake is. So we have 3 options that this talks about: maintaining weight, weight loss, and muscle gain. And obviously we want to specifically look at muscle gain, because I don't know anybody that's deliberately wanting to put on fat. It's much harder to, if you try to put on weight and then maintain weight while working out, hoping that you'll just convert fat to muscle, it's not going to work for you. You'll burn through the fat first and you'll go back down eating at a, well, I suppose after a while it ends up being a surplus, doesn't it? So 6 to 1, half a dozen the other, really, isn't it? But for weight maintenance, that number, that's your calorie intake. That's it. You've already done it. You got to step 3. I thought, what else is there to find this number? Good morning. You know, you've gotten this far, done your BMR, times it by whatever number to get your TDEE. You're done. Weight maintenance is the easy one. Based on how much you exercise and physically exert yourself in any way, and what your basal metabolic rate is, that number in front of you is the number of calories you should be eating in a day. For weight loss, you need to aim for a caloric deficit, which basically means that your calories should be less than, like the calories you put in is going to be less than what you're going to be putting out. Because obviously, if you're not putting as much in as you're putting out, you're going to be burning some of the fat, and that will result in weight loss. Commonly recommended deficit for a healthy, sustainable weight loss is around 10 to 25% of your TDEE, which, yeah, for the other thing too is for weight loss and for muscle gain, you'll want to be reviewing this, you know, maybe once a month. You know, get a bit of weight loss, recalculate, reset the bar, and eventually, sort of when you get down to your goal weight, you can then bring it back up to just a maintenance. But yeah, healthy weight loss is around 10 to 25%. If you are not used to doing this the same way that you need to warm up before you go exercise, start at that 10% first. You may want to just shred the fat right off your body, and that's amicable. But ease your body into it. Start at that 10%. Give it a month. You know, you will still see some results. At the end of that month, recalculate, and then maybe jump yourself up to a 15% deficit. And then the next month, when you recalculate, jump it up to a 20%, and then the next month up to 25%, and slowly ease yourself into it over the course of a couple of months, so that your body doesn't suddenly feel like, hang on, I'm not having as much as I would normally. You might already be eating at a capacity where you're already in a surplus, and therefore you're putting on weight. So to start with, just work at maintenance weight for a month, and increase your physical activity. That alone will work. And then, you know, do a 5% drop, do a 10%, 15%, and just increment it in. Because otherwise, if you just go from being at surplus to, okay, well, 25%, I should drop this right off, you'll end up finding at the end of the day you're still hungry. You'll likely end up snacking on something, and whether you count it or not, your body will, and you'll end up finding that you're either going and feeling hungry at the end of the day, or you're snacking a whole heap, and that's not going to help either. So it's really about control. And so if you start off with that maintenance, if you're already in a surplus, you start with that maintenance, that'll help teach you that control, drop it off by 5%, then by 10, 15, 20, 25. And by the time you get up to that 25 mark, if you're already in that, if you're starting off at a surplus, that's half a year already, and you'll have already made massive changes. So yeah, but the reason that we look at the 10 to 25% is because research shows that moderate calorie cutting will help maintain muscle mass. Because that's the last thing you want to lose is muscle mass while you're trying to lose weight. Muscle does weigh more than fat, but it's also what, you know, holds our bones and body together. So kind of want that to stay. The fat not so much, or like an excess of fat. There is still a percentage of fat that you want to have. It's also generally around about 10% mark, depending on how like cut you want to look. It can be lower. I think 6% is sort of the number I've seen as being the lowest that you really want to go. Anything lower than that, you are in danger of just at rest losing muscle mass instead, because your body's trying to preserve the fat stores. But yeah, to finish off this little paragraph here, it says, however, the exact amount of this deficit depends on specific factors like how much weight you want to lose, in what time span, your training specifics, genetics can have a factor, and then other things as well. It just says, and so on. For muscle gain, I can't give you a number. I cannot give you a number. I personally would probably recommend try going in the surplus of an opposite direction. So instead of losing a 5, a 10, a 15 or whatever, try adding that, see how that works for you. Yeah, because you're going to need a caloric deficit, a caloric surplus. So you'll need to consume more than what you're burning. And since this number is dependent on the personal factors, even more so than the deficit, it's hard to give a general recommendation for an ideal surplus. While you might gain more lean mass with a greater surplus, you might also increase your body fat process during this time. So things like your gender, your age, genetics, and then your training. And there's a whole bunch of different things to look at here when we look at your training. But they're all factors. So we're looking at things like the type of training you're doing. Are you doing majoritively cardio, so running bike, you know, rowing machine, swimming, those sorts of things? Are you doing strength training? Are you doing resistance training? Are you doing body weight predominantly? I know for, you know, lockdowns, body weight's going to be the easiest just all around because we all have a body. You know, is that your so we need to look at the type of training you're doing. We need to look at how frequently you're training. Are you doing it once a week, twice a week? Are you getting up to the 6 and 7 times a week? You know, like a once a day sort of thing. How often are you training? What's the frequency? The volume of it. So when you're training and you're doing a session, is it a 10 minutes in the morning, every morning? Is it a half an hour every afternoon? You know, are you only doing 2 or 3 sessions a week, but when you do those sessions, they're 1 hour, 2 hours long, and you're going to the gym and that's already time in your diary set out for the gym? What volume of training are you doing? And then last but not least is your experience doing those trainings. So if you've decided, yep, well, I'm gonna start doing this and use this video as like the kickoff for my weight loss journey, and I'm gonna start lifting weights. If you haven't lifted weights before, and you want to get to a point where you're building muscle, you might lose that fat real quick in a month. But then is that month all your experience for lifting weights, because at that point you're probably still not going to be on, you know, the big weights you want to be lifting. By the same extent, are you going for a run every day, you know, half-hour run or whatever? How far are you actually getting in that run before your stamina sort of runs out and you have to stop and go for a walk, or you get a stitch, or whatever it might be, because those come into it. All right, so keeping those three in mind: maintenance, weight loss, and muscle gain. Let's have a look at the ratio, balance our macros out. So for weight loss and muscle gain, your protein is going to be at 25 to 35%. Generally, we want to sort of, I mean, I personally would probably take this one at the higher end of the 35, and I'll explain why in a second. But yeah, generally speaking, that's what we're going to look at. However, if you're doing endurance training, you're going to drop that down to 15 to 25%. If you're doing strength training, it stays the same. But obviously, if you're doing strength training, your fat percentage needs to be a lot lower. For fat, the percentage for weight loss and muscle gain for fat, remembering that per gram of fat is 9 calories. So we're actually looking at essentially half of this, but its percentage is the same as your protein, at 25 to 35%. And this is where I would take the lower end of that, at the 25%. So your 25% plus the 35% is going to bring you to a nice round 60% already, which leaves the last 40% for carbs, which fits nicely in the middle of its breakdown. Keto diet is a high fat diet, so it's looking at 60 to 75%. The little breakdown they give here shows carbs basically becoming like 15%, which is ridiculous. And then we jump onto our carbs, and like I said, for weight loss, we're looking at 35 to 45% there. For muscle gain, we're looking at between 50 and 65%, which doesn't make any sense. I don't know how we can get up to 65% when the other two's lowest is 25. But they do have here that for muscle gain, it is recommended to have a smaller fat percentage than protein. So if you've already got a 10% difference, just going off building that, you've got enough space to take that 40%, or maybe even increase that with your carbs. And that's where you'll like famously see in like movies and stuff, when you've got like sports personalities and stuff, and they'll just start carb loading, you know, like a big plate of pasta, because pasta's a carb. Your ideal carbs based on your activity level, same setup as before. There's 5 levels. They are the same exact levels. The sedentary is 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. I believe it's based off body weight. Lightly active is going to be 1.5 to 2.3 grams. Moderately active, 2.3 to 3.2 grams per pound of body weight. Moderate to highly active, moderate to high intensity of exercise 1 to 3 hours per day is 2.7 to 4.5, and the same but 4 to 5 hours per day is going to be 3.6 to 5.4. And then it gives us the breakdown. Keto diet, as I said before, its carbs is only 5 to 10%. Paleo diet 20. once you get to the bottom of that, an RDA typical diet is showing us here protein at 10% to 35%, fat at 20 to 35%, carbs at 45 to 60. So if we went with the 20% for fat, 35% for protein is going to give us our 45 for carbs. Weight loss is exactly as I mentioned before, 25 to 35, 25 to 35 for protein and fat, 35 to 45 for carbs. Muscle gain, even the diagram here shows 25%, 25%, 50%, because there's no other mathematical way of making that work. So I don't know what they're trying to get there. And then the keto diet, 25 to 35% protein, same as always, but 60 to 75% fat, 5 to 10% carbs. And then at the bottom of this article, it's got some little tips and tricks for you on how to sort of keep an eye on making sure you're sort of sticking to it if you want to be like regimented about it. But yeah, that's all I've got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that notification bell as well if you want to be notified when I upload new videos. If you liked this one, please give it a thumbs up. Again, this will be in the description down below. It'll all be linked there, and then I will leave sort of the rough pounds to kilograms below. Might even just link kilograms to pound, like the Google converter below. And yeah, until next time, guys, keep your head screwed on.